Okay, quick video for the guys I coach, just how to select your deadlift stance. Ultimately, it's going to come down to trial and error. You're going to try to turn your toes out a little bit more. That felt worse. That felt better. Blah, blah, blah. This fixed my sticking and lockout. This didn't. But this is generally how I would kind of pick where you start from, where that trial and error process starts. Because there's going to be a lot of individual variability at end point. Once you're you reach a certain level of advanced, you've found a form that works best for you. And that's going to depend on limb length, how your hip sockets sit, how wide your shoulders are, and then just the relative strength of different muscle groups all are going to play a factor in how ultimately you're going to end up deadlifting. And I'm going to make a separate video on how I would cue a beginner to intermediate to how I recommend you deadlift, because I've got some strong opinions on how that should be done. But as far as just determining stance width and not trying to get too deep into that, for conventional, I recommend you choose the narrowest stance that you can hit proper positions from. So that's very dependent on your posterior chain mobility, right? So if you're really mobile and or not heavy, you're going to be able to get into position from a relatively narrow stance, in which case usually that's going to be better. When I say get into position, it's not just grab the bar, it's grab the bar from a pure hip hinge where you're not rounding over to get to the bar. It all is coming from anterior tilting of your pelvis. So what I do is as I go down to the bar, I'll put my hands on my hips and focus on that tilt of your the front and back of your iliac crest, because those are really easy to find. You want to make sure those are tilting the same number of degrees that your torso is going, so none of it is coming from your low back. And so the narrowest you can do that and still get into good position usually is going to be the best stance for you. And then from there you're going to kind of see that narrower is going to lend itself to a little bit more power off the floor, a little bit more compromised position, which is going to mean a little bit tougher at lockout. And wider is going to be a little tougher off the floor, but a little easier for you at lockout. So that's kind of my trial and error process there. And then I think there's a lot of individual variability as how much you turn out your toes. I need my toes straight forward or shit doesn't work. Owen is one of the better deadlifters I know, cranks his toes out a mile, because I think a lot of it has to do with A, the strength of his external rotators, but B, his hip anatomy is different from mine. And so you want to get them out and get your knees out as much as you can where it doesn't interfere with knocking on your elbows, and having a grip width that is hanging straight down is the ideal.